Hello, everyone. This is Chala, Dincoy, CEO and founder of the Repositioning Expert, here coming to you with another edition of the podcast Naked Marketing, where we talk about honest and authentic marketing mistakes that we've made. My guest today is the lovely Dr. Gina Cox, and I am dying to find out about all the mistakes that she's made and how she helps people and who she is. Tell us all about yourself, Dr. Gina.
Well, first of all, Chala, I had to come on this show because your title is so intriguing, and irresistible, right? But I am Dr. Gina Cox. I'm an organizational psychologist, an executive coach, a speaker, and the author of the forthcoming book, Leading Inclusion, which will be published next year. For 20 plus years, I've been helping Fortune 500 and other leaders become more effective as leaders, and also help them build the kind of organizational cultures in which any employee can thrive and be happy.
That is wonderful. Were you in like the corporate world before?
My own entire career has been spent in corporate America. That's all I know. In fact, my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology is all about understanding human dynamics in the workplace. So I say, I don't know much about anything else, but I know a whole lot about human behavior at work.
So were you in HR in all those years?
Some of that time I have worked as part of an HR organization, and sometimes I spent half of my career as an external consultant working with large consulting companies, advising leaders of other companies. So I've done it both internally and externally. And sometimes even when I was internal, it's not always in HR. It kind of depends on every company structures these things differently. The good news, Chala, is that nowadays organizational behavior, culture, leadership, being more human at work, these topics are sort of so much more important in this era with all of the disruptions that I don't even have to really explain as much as I used to what I do, because leaders are really much more interested in these ideas than ever before.
I love that, especially, coming up from, I worked for Pepsi, Pizza Hut, and Frito-Lay, and they pretty much valued their employees, like you can imagine, and probably worked with some of the companies that you're talking about that you worked at. But things are so much more mass consciousness now. Like there is just especially after COVID. Now, how are you doing with the Great Resignation?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I try not to even use that terminology, the Great Resignation. I think and the reason I say that it is because, let's be realistic, people need jobs. Most people will need a job to make a living. It's not so much that it's a resignation as it's a redefinition. It's a reprioritization. It's really reframing what we desire. And by the way, Chala, women are going to be leading this redefinition. And that's really very exciting to me, because women have always known, we tell our friends, we tell our loved ones how hard it has been for us to have great careers, to be caregivers and parents, and take care of all of our family's needs, which we really have to, because nobody else is going to do it the way we do it, and we want to do it. But we know our jobs have never really worked very well for us. And so the downside, of course, of the pandemic is that we've got all these concerns about health and stability and so on, but this will all be worked out over time. What will never go back to the old way is that women figured out it didn't work before, and we're not going to go back and just repeat the same old mistakes. So actually, what I'm seeing that is so exciting is women are saying, let's redefine leadership, let's redefine power, let's redefine influence in corporate spaces. And there's a friend of mine, Deepa Puru. Her last name is actually much longer than that, but at the risk of mispronouncing it, I'll use the shortened version, which she does too sometimes. But she has a book coming out next year that I can't wait to read, because it's going to be all about what women are asking for and what they want the future of the work to be about. I'm not just talking about more flexible schedules. Duh, we want that. I'm talking about really changing the definition of leadership, so it's not just so much defined by the patriarchy, so that if whatever the things that we need that actually makes sense and are practical in terms of how you live, how you relate to people, that people won't look down their noses at you if you have to take time off, and you can still have a career. So we women are about to change the work world, not just in the United States or Canada for that matter.
That's wonderful. Oh my gosh, I can talk to you about this for ages, but we do have to talk about marketing.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's a marketing show, fortunately or unfortunately. So tell me about how you get your clients. Now, do you have a sort of like a niche target? Do you, pick on an industry? And what is the most expensive problem they come to you with? Like, what's that look like for you?
Yeah, so I do a bit of both, but to be honest with you, because I've been in this business so long, early on, not so much, but let's say for the last 20 years or so, every day I'm doing something that I would put into the bucket of marketing. And it's often very subtle. It could be as simple as putting a post on LinkedIn, or it could be as simple as, writing, an article for a magazine or what have you. So very simple, but consistent things that I do just to maintain the presence of my name, just to make sure that people are very clear about what I do and what I don't do. So I'm always doing those kinds of things. But my ideal client, my ideal organizational client is a leader in a corporation, mid to large size corporation. And that leader is someone who's thinking about their role. What should they be doing to help create that kind of organizational culture that I was talking about earlier? Now, leaders have always wanted to do this, but never more than since the pandemic and since the murder of George Floyd, where the conversation, for example, is happening around, 25% of people are looking for a new job, 25% of people are relocating, 78% want to work from home. And then the CEOs are saying, we want to do better with regard to diversity and inclusion. A leader who's thinking about these things is my ideal client, and they often reach out with a couple of specific requests. Usually what they're saying is that we suspect that things are not as great as we think they are, but we're not quite sure what people are really experiencing on a day-to-day basis in our organization. And the reason they don't know is a very common lament from executives, which is that the higher you go in the organization, the less people tell you about the facts of the situation. They filter. So they often want to know, how can we really understand what's going on? The other thing that and with that, I help them with things like organizational studies, employee opinion surveys,
Sure.
a variety of things that we can do to understand what's going on. Another common challenge that they will ask about is they'll say, we recognize that many of our employees are telling us that many of our managers are really not that effective. You talked earlier about great resignation, and even though I don't really use that term for the reasons I stated, I understand that what employees are actually saying is, what? Many of our managers aren't good. We've tolerated it. And leaders, the top leaders are saying, we really ought to do better. Managers ought to know what they are responsible for, and they need to know how to do it. So that's something else that I help my clients with, is helping them to build a more effective leadership cadre in their organizations.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, it sounds like music to my ears. When I was in the corporate, space, I would like look for someone like you. I wanted someone like you. I had so much dead wood, so many managers I thought I knew better than. And so that's what, being on my own was the best, solution for me. I should have done it 30 years ago. But so tell us about, what was your biggest marketing mistake, even though you've been in the space and you're highly visible in your space for decades?
Yeah, the biggest marketing mistake is I once thought that you had to have all of your brand assets very perfectly defined. I would see people with beautiful logos, amazing websites, all kinds of printed assets, although nowadays people don't print as much as they used to back in the day. And I always thought, well, that's how you can tell if someone has a great brand and if they're really influential in the marketplace. So I, like many people starting businesses back in the day, I was obsessed with, I gotta have this website and I once made this huge investment where, first of all, I did by word of mouth. I found someone to build, a website for me. And the website was great. I found someone, I let that person help me with designing other collateral materials and so on. And that was all great. And logo, and spend a ton of money before I ever made a penny of revenue. And that was a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake because while that website was great, it really was not a website defined around my values, my goals for the business. It was a beautiful website in an abstract sense, in that on its own, it's a beautiful website. But what does it do for Gena's business? And does it really speak to the needs of my particular customer? At that time, I didn't know any better. In fact, it didn't. And that site lasted, I tolerated it, I should say, maybe for a year or so, just because I had to have something and I tolerated it. I had spent all this money. So the thing that I have learned over the years with regard to your visual representation is, first of all, it's not about how much money you spend on that. And in fact, now I say that's not the first thing. The first thing, and I'm sure Chala knows way more about this than I. First thing is to be really clear about what it is that you are trying to, what you're solving for your clients. Keep that in the forefront. If you have that in the forefront, what you will discover is that your clients aren't as interested in your website as they are in your ability to articulate their challenge and then articulate potential solutions in a way that makes them feel like you're the first person that has ever really heard them. And none of that requires that particular website. It might, but that's not the starting point. In fact, I would say you probably can't do a good job in designing your material, your physical materials, your website and so on, until after you're crystal clear about that strategic intent. And even sometimes until after you've had a few clients under your belt and you start to understand what they do want and what they don't want. That's when you start to be able to differentiate what really supports, your marketing efforts. So flip everything upside down to what you might be naturally inclined to do, and then work with someone who really thinks about marketing in that same strategic way.
Yeah. Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. And you don't even do marketing, but this is the hard-earned lessons, right? That's why we have this show, and I love it. It's true. I often think that people would never, that you're not even allowed to build a house by having your gardener or your contractor do a blueprint. And you can't even get a permit to do a house without a blueprint that's done by an actual person who does blueprints for a living, which is an architect. And yet when I left corporate and I looked at small businesses, that's what they're doing, is they're letting their web designer make a blueprint for the business, or they're letting, like the SEO guy, or they're hiring sales reps and hoping that the sales rep knows where to focus, what to target, what's the niche, all those things. So yeah, the strategy, so I couldn't have said it even better than that. So thank you. So what are parting words of advice on marketing?
Yeah. So, well, there's that piece I just said, don't get the cart before the horse. That's really, that's a very important thing. The other thing that I have learned is that I get I'm now a little better able to differentiate the purpose of every piece of marketing that I create. So that's something that you don't learn that at the beginning. You kind of figure that out. But here's what I mean by that. Everything is marketing. So while you might be thinking that you're just going to be focused on, like I said, the website or a certain kind of brochure or what have you, everything you do is marketing. So today I'm here, and you notice that as I'm speaking to Chala about what I do, I'm marketing right now. And in this instance, what I'm really focused on is being really crystal clear and sharply focused on the things I want you to remember about what I do for a living. And then that means that there are many other things that I could talk about today, and I'm not going to talk about them. So that focus, it's really important to know that whenever you are out in the world and whenever your materials are out in the world working for you, be clear about who the audience is, what you want the audience to get for that particular thing, and then just focus. Don't try to put all of your eggs into one marketing asset.
Very, very well said. No, how could people reach you, Dr. Gina?
Well, they can reach me in my temporary website, by the way, because I do have a brand new one under construction, www.feelshuman.com. You can also contact me within that website for, if you want to send me a note or ask me a question. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. My name is Genacox, and I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I love engaging with folks on LinkedIn. It's probably another easy way to track me down. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk with you about what I've learned. I'd love to answer any questions you have about my business. More than anything else, I just love, I've become quite a fan of social media. So I enjoy it quite a bit.
Thank you so much for being our guest, Dr. Gina.
Oh, Chala, this has been a pleasure. Naked marketing.